everybody. Donna Knapp. Welcome to ITSM Academy and this month's webinar, Getting and Keeping Executive Buy-in. And those of you who attend my state of webinars that I do every January know that for years now, I've been talking about the fact that lack of leadership support year in and year out rises to the top of the challenge list for organizations. And so I'm super excited that we're doing this webinar today, and very, very excited that we have in the house David Cannon. I was looking at the audience as we were getting started, and a lot of you know David. David and I can remember when we first met. We don't remember exactly the year, but it was at least, we think, 20 years ago, because it was before I came to work for ITSM Academy, and I've been here 17 years. So it's been a while. But David, as you know, really has been around the IT service management community for years and is viewed as a pioneer in this area. If you have any of the idle publications, chances are you've got one with his cover on the name of it, going back to version 2, version 3, version 4, and now we're hearing rumors of version 5. He's also going to bring insight that he's gotten from working for companies like HP and Forrester and BMC. So we're super happy to have him here today. And we also have Ken Jarvis, and Ken is a businessman, entrepreneur, thought leader, really very much recognized for his acumen as a CIO, which is where we get to tap into his brain today, and very much recognized as a turnaround specialist for organizations going through digital transformation. So we get to hear from executives today what's going on in their, the method to the madness, and how we can get their support. So David, if you want to just turn to the next slide very, very quickly. For those of you who are new to ITSM Academy, we're a full service provider of IT service management related education, ITIL, DevOps, experience, CPDE, Agile service management, value stream management, SRE. We're a woman-owned business established in 2004, so do the math. We're celebrating our 20th year anniversary this year, which is super exciting. So without further ado, David, if you want to go to the next slide, I'm going to launch a poll. And so while David's kind of covering the agenda, let's do a quick poll. And this poll actually mirrors a poll that was done by Axelos back in 2022, asking about what IT service management challenges were facing your organization. So I'm going to launch the poll, and then I'm going to hand things over to you, David, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Donna. Good to see you again. I need to add that even if it has been 20 years, we look even better today than we did then.
Thank you.
And so
I think that really headshot on the previous slide was from back then, by the way. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, really good to be here with you all, and thanks for hosting Ken and I. So Ken and I are currently working at PeopleCert. We're involved in all things ITIL and DevOps and even Prince 2. We, as you've mentioned, we've both worked in positions where we've been executives. We've also been in the position where we've had to run one or other type of program or project. Very often, in my case, mainly ITSM. But so what we really want to do is focus on the experience that we have. This is not meant to be an out of the book presentation. It is really based on the experience that we've had over the years. And I'm really happy that we've got Ken here today, because Ken has been that CIO, the one when we complain about the lack of buy-in from senior management. He's the guy we're talking about. So we're gonna get his perspective on this. I'm very happy that he's here. But before we get into that, first we're going to cover some background. What is the issue here? And we're going to look at a little bit of research that was done. And the research tells a very interesting story, which I'm going to walk through. The whole thing about a lack of buy-in, why don't we get buy-in from senior management? Donna asked the question as we were discussing this, are we actually asking the right question? And she was right. I don't think we were asking the right question. So we're going to look at what the right question is. Then we're going to look at why executives would buy into an ITSM program, and very often why they do not. It's important to understand both the positive and the negative of that. We're going to look at how we keep executives engaged throughout the life of the program. And if it's an ITIL or ITSM program, that will go on for years and years and years, because it's an essential capability within an organization. So how do we retain their engagement and their attention, their commitment? Then the role of education. I think this is a very important question. I think in many companies, the role of education is one that is, let's say, changing. The type of education that we do, the way we do education is changing. So how do we use education in these projects, especially given the kind of changes that are happening out there? And then just a very simple engagement checklist that we'd like to share with you. And included in that engagement checklist is a list of the type of metrics that executives love. So things that you should be including in either your business cases, your metrics and reports, and so on. So that's what we're going to cover today. And I've spent already way too much time talking on the agenda. I hope, Donna, have you got the results of the poll?
I do. So here we go. Here are the results. So, no surprise, lack of buy-in from senior management rises to the top. And it's interesting. I was kind of floating between the two. It does, somewhat mirror what we saw, 2 years ago, not having influence in inefficient work practices. Lacking the right people, right, comes in third on that. Which, I think probably ties into the conversation of education a little bit. The need for more collaboration. That might be next year what we talk about. Why are we still now talking about breaking down silos and collaborating across teams? Right? But there are our results. Right?
Great. And very close, in fact, to the results that we saw in 2022 in the survey that Axelos did. There you have it. So very similar results. Again, lack of buy-in from senior management just being right at the top there. ITSM not having enough influence right behind it. So that's what the research tells us, but it also told us some other things. It asked what projects organizations are focusing on. So what is the level of adoption of ITSM practices within your organization? And what was interesting, also not surprising, was the fact that top of the list there were things like service desk, incident management, service request management, change enablement, and problem management. Now, if I think about that, how many senior executives really want to know about the ins and outs of how you manage changes? Do they want to know whether changes work or not? Absolutely. Do they want to know how you do it? Not always. And so what we're seeing here is that our major projects, the things we focused 90% of our attention on, are things that are very operational, so operational, in fact, that very often the CIO of the organization may be interested in the results of these, but may not be interested in the nuts and bolts of what goes on there. So we already have a bit of a thing working against us. Now let's take a look at that. Let's have a look at the things that are not working that well in organizations. And again, this goes back to 2022. Knowledge management was one that was, had a lot of improvement. Relationship management, continual improvement. Service configuration management is another one. Continual improvement. Supplier management. Now, these things are very interesting to executives. They really want to know that relationships are working well. They really want to know that we've got our suppliers under control. They really want to know that the quality of services that we're delivering is good. And yet those are the practices where we need the most improvement. So just a little bit of a story there. And then we all know as service managers that one of the basic concepts of service management is being able to map the service to the outcome. So here's the service. This is why we use it, and this is what it achieves when we use it. But it turns out that, by 2021, really, we were still in the process of mapping services. 38% of companies were trying to figure it out. 24% of companies were hardly anywhere. So the majority of companies were in a position where their services were not effectively linked to the business outcomes. So we're really focusing on building back office efficiency and being able to manage incidents effectively, in resolving problems, managing changes. But what we're not doing is spending a lot of time on mapping what we do to what the business is experiencing. So that in itself tells us a bit of a story. We're actually not putting the work in that will help get these executives on board. A lot of what we're going to be talking about today comes out of this slide, which is, if you want to get executives on board, understand how what you're doing impacts them. And so we'll talk about that later. But I just wanted to show that this research tells a very interesting story. I did a bit of a search on the internet, and I looked up, and you can see the names of places that I hit. So there's Gartner, Forrester, IDC, Tech Target, Flexera, CIO Magazine, and there were a few more as well. And I took all of their top 10 issues. Some of them had 12, some of them had 7. But I compared them all, and I created this list of top 10 issues facing CIOs. These were consistently across most, if not all, of those lists. But what was interesting about that is they fell into 2 broad categories. One was this whole area of strategy and business alignment. So we have a CIO who is working in the organization, who's meeting regularly with business leaders. And these are the things that he or she is having to deal with. So cybersecurity threats, number one. Now, we may argue that that is partially a technology-based issue, but increasingly it's becoming business-based as we're talking about ransomware and so on. So cybersecurity threats are very much on a high profile amongst the business community. There's economic uncertainty. What is going to happen? Do we need to prepare for an upturn or a downturn? And how do we make sure that our IT systems are scalable to be able to support our company no matter which way it goes? Hybrid workforce is something we're all dealing with. Digital transformation, again, being driven by the business. We need to become more digital. We need to invest in faster, better technologies that enable our business. We need our IT department to help us become more innovative. Then on the technology side, so they're looking back into the IT organization and they're facing these issues. How do I acquire and retain the talent that I need, especially given how technology is growing? We're just now getting people trained up as cloud architects and cloud specialists, and still there are not enough. And we've been in this business for 10, 15 years, and we still have a shortage of staff here. How do we make sure we get the right staff and keep them? Cloud complexity and spend is a major issue facing CIOs today. Modernizing infrastructure. There's an interesting one about that, and that is that modernizing infrastructure is being done in many organizations independently of the actual business value that it's bringing. And that's sometimes not a good sign. We'll talk about that later. Data management and analytics, and then adopting AI and emerging technologies. I added one there because it didn't appear on all of the reports, but it's a significant one. It talks about the changing culture of the workplace, and it's about this idea that more and more people are getting access to and managing the resources they need to do their jobs. And one of those is democratization of development and data. So we're seeing a change in culture. And so not only are we trying to solve all of these challenges, but we're doing it in a workforce that is fundamentally shifting in its culture. So the question is, if this is what your CIO is facing, how does your ITSM program help to solve those 10 issues? You'll notice there is not a single one of those points that contains the words ITSM or ITIL or even DevOps. it's all about, much higher level than that. So if we have an ITSM program and that's topmost on our mind, we have to sell it to a CIO for whom these things are topmost in their mind. How do you make that bridge? And that's one of the questions that I'm going to lead into the next section with, because that is what we're really here to discuss. So, are we asking the right question? Donna did something, which we all did actually. She turned to ChatGPT. So what does ChatGPT say? That's WDCS, right? It's a big buzzword these days. And this is what it gave us. It says, these are the things you should do. So I just made a list of them. They have a nice, neat little paragraph underneath each one, of course. But these were the major points. And we had a look at this, and Ken immediately jumped in and said, but hold on, the question you need to be asking isn't there. What was that question, Ken?
I can't remember which one you're talking about. If it's the okay, that's the one. But the key one was what's in it for them as well. Okay, if you want buy-in from somebody, you've got to prove that it's advantageous to that individual to give you the support. That was the key point to me, the key question. Okay, what is in it for that influencer?
Right. And very, very often we talk about executives as if they are an organization, but actually they're people.
Yep.
And they're wrestling with challenges, and just as all of us are. And so we really have to, who's the person that I need the buy-in from?
Yep.
It's not always going to be the CIO, right, Ken?
Correct. And I think the two parts of the question is, which executive is not supporting this? Is it the CIO, him or herself? Because sometimes the CIO is not going to buy into an ITSM program, and that could be multiple reasons. They may think this is not important. They may think that this is something that should just be happening. They may have been appointed from the business. Many CIOs are appointed from the business today and not necessarily grown up through the grassroots. Or is the CIO struggling to sell the concept to his or her executive, selling to the COO or the CEO? Who is the executive that's not buying in? And I think that's the place to start. So if I'm IT ops and my CIO is not buying in, that's one set of conversations. If I'm the CIO and I've not got the COO or CEO buy-in, then that's another set of questions. But it still does come back to, who do I need to buy in from? What's in it for them? How do I convince them that this is the right thing to do?
So please keep the questions coming in chat. Luigi, I see your question there. We're going to come to that in a moment. And by the way, for anybody who doesn't know Luigi, please check out his podcast. I believe it's every Friday. You can find information about that on LinkedIn. Thanks, Luigi, for the question. We'll get to that a little bit later. So how do we find the right sponsor? And here are some questions. It's not always the most obvious person. We very often go up our chain of command and say, well, it needs to be the person that's at the top of that chain of command. And you're probably right. But they may not be the right person to approach initially. You may need somebody else to help champion this and to help get other people on board. We have this thing called stakeholder analysis, right? That's part of it. But it's more than stakeholder analysis. It's getting to know who in your organization is going to drive the success. It's going to help you drive the success of your program. One of the key things is, does that person have the level of authority you need? I can't tell you how many times we get into an organization and somebody's trying to define a strategy. And we say, well, who's accountable for the strategy working? And they say, well, we're just the architect. We're helping somebody else. Have they seen the strategy? No, we've got to develop it before we give it to them. It's the person who has the authority that's accountable for this thing that needs to be driving it. So is there somebody who has authority over an area that your ITSM program is touching? Very important. A second question is, can they influence other decision makers? So they may not necessarily have the authority, but they may play a role in helping you to get the ear of the person who does have the authority and help to keep your program top of mind. Do they understand the importance of ITSM? And we spoke quite a bit of this about this as we prepped for this call. And there was a feeling almost that sometimes a CIO kind of takes for granted that ITSM is working, right? So it's operations, it gets done, things are working. If there are incidents, we take care of them. Why do I need to focus on the ITSM program? What's your response to that, Ken, as a CIO?
Yeah, it comes back to the point I was making about CIOs thinking they have other more important things to do, which of course they do. But at the end of the day, it is absolutely critical that I'm running a stable, meets the business requirements, IT operation. I include development in that. So yes, this doesn't exclude DevOps, but the whole ITSM program is critical. So any CIO, needs to ensure that their ITSM rollout is working, that it's there, and needs to be getting the measures and keeping their finger on the pulse. If it starts to slide, if people start to say this is no longer important, and remember, the leader will tell you what's important. So if a CIO believes that ITSM is no longer of importance, that will filter through the system and it will filter down to other people thinking it's no longer of importance. So the CIO needs to continually be aware of why ITSM is critical, even if it's working. Keep improving it, keep monitoring it, keep measuring it. Because if people see you lacking interest, that will drive a culture of lacking interest in and of itself. So, and all you need is one to start having a few outages to start to get that refocus again. But a CIO cannot let go of ITSM, even if it's working well. And the measures are critical to keeping the finger on the pulse.
Especially in this day and age where customer experience is so top of mind for everybody, those practices like service desk and incident and problem that were, are viewed as so operational. When they're not working, it is very much going to get the CIO's attention, I would think.
And some of the points that David raised on the top 10 CIO concerns, without decent ITSM, you're not going to be able to address those. So managing cloud, without a decent ITSM infrastructure system, you're not going to manage cloud. And remember, we started off by cloud being a business. They went off and did their own thing. It's now coming back in-house. Okay, so they're having to control that. How do I control that without IT service management? How do I control my expenditure without understanding what services I run, what assets I need to control? So I would turn around and say that although ITSM doesn't directly impact the top 10 CIO concerns, I will say without ITSM, you're never going to get on top of those 10 top concerns anyway. So this is a critical part of the foundation for any CIO.
So basically, it's on us as ITSM program managers to make the link to what's important for that CIO, and that means getting to understand them, spending either time with them or somebody who reports to them and knows them well.
Yep, absolutely, David. Join the dots. What's in it for the CIO to keep? If the CIO is losing interest, it's up to the person advising the CIO as to why that CIO needs to keep an interest. And coming back to the point, the second last line, what happens if I don't invest in it? What could be the downside of me lacking interest in ITSM?
There are some scenarios where I think we've all been in organizations where an executive will get this idea, hey, we're going to do X, ITSM, we're going to introduce AI bots on our service desk, whatever it is. And they get this idea, and for the next 6 months, all you can hear about is this idea, and then suddenly it just fades away. And we've been spinning our wheels trying to get this thing done. What's happened there?
So rephrase the question,
No,
please.
So we hear organizations that say, okay, we're going to implement ITIL, and then it goes like that for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you don't hear anything about ITIL.
Yeah.
And then the next thing they say is, oh, we're going to do DevOps, and that's all you can hear about for the following 2 years. What's causing these kind of shifts?
Flavor of the day, what conference did I last attend? What webinar did I last attend? So we need to run these more often and get ITSM back to the top of the agenda. No, just obviously said in jest, but it is the people are looking for the silver bullet, and I know we talk about that on a later slide. They're always looking for what's the magic silver bullet that's going to make that next leap forward in either delivery or stability or cost effectiveness or innovation. And at the end of the day, there is no one silver bullet. There are multiple silver bullets, and you need all of them. So I can't do, as an ex-CIO, I loved ITSM from an ops point of view, and I loved DevOps from a dev point of view. Getting the two to integrate was my problem, and I think collaboration between teams was one of the issues on both the 2022 and Donna's instant survey at the beginning of the call. How do you get DevOps and ITSM to work together? You can't, as a CIO, this is one value chain for me. From an idea of a new development to running this in production, that's one piece of work. Don't tell me they're two separate pieces and I can't do without either of them. I need ITSM, I need DevOps, and I need everybody to work together. And that doesn't go away. And yes, you can bring Agile in. I get that, but Agile does not negate ITSM. You still need these issues. So people, you heard when Agile came out, oh, good, that does away with ITSM. Where does it do away with ITSM? Agile does not supersede ITSM. ITSM is still the foundation on which you need Agile to work with. David, I think people keep looking for silver bullets. They keep ignoring the basics. Many times when I have been consulting to CIOs or CEOs who are worried that the IT shop's not working properly, I launch a back to basics campaign because they're just not there. They had it, they forgot about it, it dwindled in the thoughts. And Luigi's question as well, once the consultants have left, how do we keep it going? How do consulting practices leave the right mindset and skill to keep the processes and the practices going continually? And I love the question, is there a training program where we can help the people that are left behind continue to keep the focus on ITSM? I thought it was a great question from Luigi.
Yes, and we're going to come back to it as well.
Yeah.
And so bottom line on this is, number one, we have to think a little bit more outside of our own frame of reference. We have to think about what's in it for the executive that we're having to get buy-in from. And we have to keep understanding, we have to keep checking in on that to make sure that we understand those what's in it for me aren't changing. And if they are changing, how do we keep mapping to that?
Yep.
So,
and by the way, it's no different from if a CIO is battling to get buy-in, and let's say that CIO reports to the CEO, what's in it for the CEO to take an interest in ITSM? Okay, why should they do it? And you talk about cybersecurity threats. Okay, once again, the role ITSM plays in a cybersecurity threat, both preemptively and if you have a cybersecurity issue, ITSM is critical to both the preparation and the reaction to any cybersecurity. So you can't divorce these issues.
Now, why do executives buy in or not buy in to ITSM? And I've got a list of things there. I think we've covered some of these already. By the way, we didn't prepare these slides as a canned presentation. We prepared them as a basis for discussion. So that's kind of what we're doing here. We've already covered the fact that a lot of CIOs feel that they're under pressure to do something else. For example, one big thing that's happening right now is business units are saying, how can we use AI? And we've got this generative AI stuff that's going on, and we need some guidance, and we need some help, and we need some, and CIOs are trying to respond to this, and they're having to learn, they're having to research, they're having to get all this information, and then they're still having to make sure that things go on as usual. So I suspect, Ken, the tendency is for CIOs to say the stuff that needs to be managed as usual, Let me trust my direct reports to take care of that, and I'll focus on this leading edge stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's coming out in some of the questions again from both Michael and Kevin. It must just run in the background. Okay, this must just work whilst they're looking, at new terminologies, as Michael was pointing out, and best practices, and this is hokey pokey. You can't do, if it's working well as a CIO. David, you know this. We used to work together on implementations when I was a CIO, and that goes back 30 years, Donna. So David and I have known each other for many, many decades. But as a CIO, I always implemented ITSM as a starting point. I worked for 5 major corporates, and my starting point was, let me implement ITSM. I needed that foundation in place. Once it's working well, I need the continual measures to see that it continues to work well. If it continues to work well, I don't need to be involved. But the minute I see on my dashboard a measure that's starting to worry me, I will go back to ITSM, and I will revisit it, and I will be, if something needs to change. ITIL 4, what's happening with cloud? How's ITIL 4 addressing the cloud environment? You need to be revisiting these issues as and when they arise.
I looked at the questions in the chat there, and a couple of things to Kevin. I do think that there is some truth to what you're saying about ITIL being viewed as kind of a religion that has come and gone in a sense. I don't believe that's true, but I do believe there are people that kind of approach any kind of framework in that way. You have these zealots, these fanatics. And what they do is they push that. The answer to all your problems is ITIL, DevOps, Agile, you name it, right? And of course, the answer is not in one individual one of those things. And so what it tends to do is kind of tarnish the approach a little bit and jade it a little bit. And that leads to that point on the slide there. They tried ITIL, now we need something else. It's a perception thing. It's not a reality thing. The reality is, I really need to keep focusing on what ITIL has taught me. Now, whether you call it ITIL in your organization or not is up to you. You can call it whatever you like. But what you've learned out of ITIL, and that ability to deliver services effectively and efficiently, you've got to continue to do that no matter what the approach is that becomes flavor of the day. And then Michael, this is interesting. I love these buzzwords of fail fast and forever forward. Fail fast and forever forward are not outcomes, right? They're not a what's in it for me. They're a way to get to an outcome. They're an approach, just as ITSM is an approach. And I find it very interesting sometimes when somebody latches onto one of these buzzwords as an outcome rather than as a way of achieving an outcome. I think that can get very confusing as well. So in these conversations, you have to keep driving back behind the fail fast. What is it that we're trying to achieve? What is the outcome that we're looking for by failing fast? Is it greater levels of innovation? Is it the ability to position products to our customers faster? Is that the outcome that we're looking for? And we bring that back into ITSM and say, how does ITSM solve that? Not as how does ITSM fail fast? Because that's not always the best way. But how does ITSM enable a culture in which products can be launched quicker?
So,
sorry, Ken.
Yeah. David, I get it, okay? Yeah. Without ITSM, how do you know if you failed fast? You won't know you failed without some of the ITSM principles and disciplines in place. You may continually fail and you don't even know it yet. Okay, so I'd say without ITSM, you can't even measure, forever forward and fail fast. I think it's very tough to measure those outcomes. Very quick to be able to figure out if you failed fast and fail fast, recover quickly. Sure, okay. ITSM disciplines will help you identify that quickly rather than keep failing and nobody knows it.
I just noticed on my screen that my slides are not forwarding. Is that the case for the rest of the webinar?
We're on why don't executives buy into ITSM?
Then we're fine. Don't worry.
I think you're where you want to be.
That's fine. It's just my display is playing up. I apologize. We'll carry straight on. One other thing on this slide is we often find that ITSM projects are driven by somebody within an operational unit. They could be, a server administrator, cloud administrator, application manager, or something like this, and they're driving for ITSM. But it's not coming from the CIO, so it's like a grassroots effort. Now, it's valid. We grassroots efforts are sometimes very important, but they have to be sold differently. They have to. You still have to go through this campaign of understanding what's in it for the stakeholders, and especially for the person who's going to be authorizing this. You need to convince them that this is going to help them drive their agenda, even if it's not on their agenda today.
Interesting question from Kevin, David.
So I was just gonna say, you want to comment on that?
I'd love to comment on it, and I'm gonna answer it egg or chicken, because with the turnover of CIOs in today's world, I think the average half-life of a CIO is less than 3 years at the moment. I'd love to say it's the ITSM culture that's going to drive it. That needs to be first. So promoting the ITSM culture, to me, should be the priority. Okay, but without a CIO drive, you're not going to promote the culture. And I think, Kevin, that is the chicken and egg. But the ITSM culture should be set, because if the CIO keeps changing, the culture will assist the CIO in just adopting it. And thank you.
Yeah. So here we go. Just to kind of sum up some of the things we've been talking about. So what will help these sponsors to buy in? First of all, if we understand what's in it for them, if we understand how our ITSM program helps them to achieve their agenda. Now, ITSM directly may not be on their agenda, but if we understand how ITSM supports that, and one of the really cool things to do is to get ITSM stats onto the dashboard of their agenda. Mm-hmm. So that they can see directly how your ITSM program is impacting their ability to drive quality or whatever it is that's on their agenda. I'm going to move on to the next one. Sorry, Dane, we're just reading your question there.
This time your slides didn't change.
No, because I was reading Dane's question.
Okay.
I just want to pause a minute here, and I want to just remind everybody about value. We'll come back to you, Dane. I just want to remind everybody about value. We talk a lot about, and in fact, even on ChatGPT, it said, find out what the value drivers are. Value drivers. Well, there's two types of value drivers, and we've got to be very clear about which value driver we're supporting here, right? So value equals outcomes that are greater than investment. I don't care how you measure it, whether it's perception or finance or whatever it is. I mean, we make value judgments every day. But what you're trying to achieve must be more important and bigger than what you spend or the effort taken to do it. Now, if I look at the list of outcomes that business leaders and CIOs look for, they're on the left-hand side there, right? They want greater revenue. They want new products and services quicker. They want to penetrate new markets. They want to grow their market share, customer loyalty, et cetera, right? On the right-hand side are the efforts that it takes, the investment that it takes to achieve those outcomes. And what was interesting when I started looking down this was looking at what those investments were. Service improvement. I can't tell you how many times we've been in projects where we consider service improvement to be an outcome. When you look at it from a revenue point of view, did that thing drive more revenue or not? Service improvement is a spend. It's an investment. It's not perceived by the business as a return. It's perceived as an investment. Same thing as break fix, right? So we're sitting on our service desk and we're saying we do a great job in adding value to the business by fixing incidents. No, what we actually do is a great job in restoring services that should never have gone down in the first place if they truly were that valuable, right? So we should be very careful. A lot of our ITSM programs focus on viewing those things that are listed in investment as if they were some kind of outcome. Whereas in actual fact, all we're doing is we're demonstrating that we're spending a little bit less money. That's a very dangerous road to go in, because the minute you say to your business units, hey, we're great because we saved you 10% on your operations budget last year. Guess what they're going to ask you for next year, right? Oh, great. You're so good at saving money. How about you save us 15% next year? And we don't want to be in that position. So it's really important, just to sum up this whole discussion, if you want to focus on the what's in it for me for your executive, find out the things in that green column that are driving them, and then figure out how to link the stuff in the blue column to those things so that you can prove that what you're doing enables something that is greater in value. So, very often, one of the most common ROI reports that we see is the payback period. In other words, I'm going to invest in this new technology because in 6 months' time, I will have recovered that amount of money in my operating budget. Again, that comes down to cost saving. That's important, but it's not enough to drive that kind of executive support on an ongoing basis. Okay. Sorry, now, how do we keep executives engaged? And I need to keep an eye on time. We're doing well. We know that things change all the time. So a couple of things. One is that what's important to a CIO may change from year to year, or even quarter to quarter, depending on what the business units are telling them. We may also find that one CIO leaves and a new CIO joins us. So how do we, Ken, I guess this is a question for all of us. How do we make sure that we keep on top of what's driving that level of engagement?
Once again, I think your previous slide is understand the outcomes that are needed. Engage with the business. A CIO today is not just a technologist. A CIO today, I talk about there's very few executives in a business that understand a business end to end. A CIO engages with every single vertical line in the business, whether that be manufacturing or sales or finance or HR. A CIO is engaging with all of them. Very few people, executives, do that. So a CIO can get a very, very good view of the collective outcomes across an organization. And if the CIO is still reporting to the CEO, which I believe should be happening on an ongoing basis, it's unfortunately busy detracting from that. CIOs, while back started reporting to CEOs, it's kind of backtracking and then reporting into another C-suite exec. But what are the strategic outcomes that the business is looking for, and find ways to plug into that. Now, they change, okay? Depending on what happens in any given year, COVID changed every organization's strategic objectives, okay? I need to be nimble enough. I need to be quick enough to be able to move the organization, the IT operation in a fast and efficient way. But no, and this is the point I think around ITSM. If I wish to engage with the business and I'm not running a stable environment, no business is going to listen to me. So once again, that's where you need ITSM. It gives you the credibility to go and have the conversation with business. I've seen too many CIOs walk into another executive's business and they say, I'm here to add value and be innovative. And the guy says, you can't even keep the lights on. Email was down last night. That system hasn't been working for this long. But you want to have a strategic conversation with me? You can't have a strategic conversation and start asking about outcomes and adding value if your operation is not doing what it should be doing as a basic. So things change. I think the question from Michael, buzzword of the day. ITSM needs to become part of the culture. It needs to be a given, because without those disciplines of keeping the shop operation, measuring what's happening on any ongoing basis, you're not going to be able to go in. You're not going to be able to fastly react to a change in business, and therefore you're not going to keep the interest.
So let me ask a different question. Let's say I'm the operations director.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to implement an ITSM. I want to have this ITSM initiative. We've got some of it in place, but I want to put it all together and I want to drive it to the next level. And I want to know what's on your agenda as the CIO. How would I go about finding out?
Ask me what my outputs are at any given point in time. I don't believe that, if whether you've got a formal KPI, OKR, system or not, is not the point. Everybody knows what's expected of them in that year. David, you and I now reporting to a boss. We know what his expectations are. It's not written in any system. He's not sent us an email about it, but we can articulate very clearly what is expected of us in the year 2024. It'd be really nice if your staff came to you and said, "What are your outputs and how can we help you align?"
Right.
Ask the question is an easy one. And if the
So,
CIO turns around and says, I've got to be faster. I've got to, they want to know, how we can improve, what training our staff need. Well, guess what? Depending on what the incidents are showing you, you could start to direct what training requirements are needed. All of the measures will drive a specific strategic outcome. Ask the question.
take the initiative, get
Take
yourself
it.
on the calendar, sit and
Yep.
have a discussion with your CIO. Now, what if I feel I'm too junior?
But sooner or later, you've got to grow up and become more senior.
So take the initiative, right? So,
Ask,
yeah,
ask your direct supervisor, your direct boss, hey, what are your outputs? How can I help you? There's no level issue here. Whether I am an operator and I can talk, I was a computer operator, okay? Whether I'm a computer operator and I'm talking to my supervisor and I say, how can I help you do a better job? I can ask that question. What are you trying to achieve? What are you being measured as? And then I can align. And if I align, that's good for my career. It's good for his career. And we all get promoted. So
right.
find out what your direct superiors' outputs and objectives are.
Great. Great advice. And it doesn't always mean jumping 3 levels and going and sitting down with the
No,
CIO. No,
no.
it just, yeah, good.
My first mentor used to always say I needed to always be prepared to bump into the CEO in the elevator, be prepared for a conversation.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
I think,
Yeah.
you never know when you might not have the
Absolutely.
opportunity to have a conversation with that person.
And ask the CEO, hey, what are you trying to achieve this year? Or hey, what are your challenges? Yeah, no CEO will not answer that question. I promise you, no CEO will not answer that question.
So let's move on to the next, which is what is the role of education? And I read Dane's question again. Thank you, Dane. A bit of a plug there for us, but actually not just that, but I think that's true. I think it's really helpful when trying to unravel these things and make sense of them and put your plans together to really get some perspective from people outside the organization and people who've been through this before as well. And so we certainly have tools that enable you to do this. I want to have a quick aside on this, and it's a personal note, and that is that it surprises me sometimes with how complex this is and how much we need to be able to do that we think we can do it by just taking a foundation course and we're done. And I think the point that we're going to make here is that we're now being asked to think more strategically, to think a little bit more organizationally, to think a little bit more interpersonally. And that's going to take more than just a single practice course or a single foundation course. It's going to take more than even just ITIL. So let's talk about the role of education. A good question here that came up, and that is, what level of education do you think executives need? Do they all need to be foundation certified? Do they all need to be managers certified? I mean, what do they need?
No. To repeat, I've been a CIO for 20 years in 5 different corporates, so averaging 4 years each. I've never done the fundamental ITIL program. It was not needed at my level. Does that mean I don't buy into it? Of course not. I have implemented, specifically ITIL and IT service management disciplines wherever I've been, and I did that, in the first 3 to 6 months of going into any organization. I need to understand the executive level requirements. So you need an executive level of education. And as you move further down, so you need a little bit more detail. But certainly at CIO level, you do not need to be, to go on a 2-3 day course. That is not needed. So you need an executive level education, which should be covered in 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours. So I would think that is there. And then of course you go down to ITIL Foundation courses, ITIL Master courses. And if you're going to, once again, coming back to, I think it was Michael's question about keeping it going, having a few ITIL Masters in your organization is certainly going to help keep that momentum going, because they will drive it themselves, and that will reduce the requirement to have the consultants on board the whole time. I think Dane's point's valid. Let them help you set it up. Okay, come in on a regular basis and see where you can improve, but you need to own and drive this yourself, and that's where the education comes in.
Right. So depending on the type of organization, this could be a center of excellence. It could be a service management office. But something that recognizes the importance of service management in the organization.
And try and become self-sufficient and self-driving. And that's not diminishing the role of the consultants and etc. They need to come in, but I don't need them coming in every week or every day, because then I'm not owning it. I need to own it myself, as a CIO, as an IT ops person, as the ITSM service director.
So there are a couple of other things on there. We don't have too much time left, but I'd like to cover those. There's 2 points on there. And the one is, we send people on training and they come back into the organization excited because they're going to do this. They're going to apply these new skills that they've learned. And then suddenly there's no opportunity for them to do that. They're just, okay, you went in the training and I get back to work and do what you're told. How do we change that kind of behavior?
That's just poor leadership. Why am I sending somebody in education if they're not going to come back and implement it? That you talk about waste of budget.
Right.
The budget. Okay. Please go on an ITIL education course and come back. So what do you want me to do with that? We're not installing ITIL, but you went on a good course. It once again must align to the strategic outcome. You must only go on training if you're going to run a program to do something with it, or it's going to help you achieve a strategic outcome.
So it's up to us as program leaders to really identify which outcomes we expect to achieve by having people on those courses. Absolutely. And allow them to achieve that outcome when they get back.
And when they come back, put it into practice straight away. Don't see somebody on an ITIL fundamental course, but you're only going to implement it in 9 months. Yeah, nobody has the ability to remember all of that stuff from 9 months ago.
And I have to say, as an educator, we've trained, thousands and thousands of folks over the years. And the most successful programs, and the ones that very often brought us the most joy as educators, were ones where the sponsor came in at the start of a foundation class or an awareness class and said, this is why we're doing this. Yes. This is maybe a high-level view of the roadmap, the journey we're going to take. And now here's what I expect from you. I expect you to, learn and understand and embrace this new way of working. It's invaluable.
Outstanding point, Donna. Really, really good. Really, really good tip.
Right. Let's move to the last section of the webinar, and that is what we promised: engagement checklist and an outline of some of the metrics that really matter to executives.
So, David, before you start this, I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
We're talking about ITIL. As you go through this checklist, and I kind of know the answer to this question, but could we not substitute Agile?
Yes, we could.
Substitute DevOps, substitute value stream management, pick your way of working. This checklist will work.
It absolutely will work. And the important thing here is to recognize that this is not an all or nothing. You're going to have ITIL in your organization. You're going to have DevOps in your organization. You're likely to have Agile somewhere in your organization. So this is not an all or nothing. This only applies to those ITIL programs. This applies to any kind of initiative that we're creating. So yes, absolutely.
And it does come back to Dane's point at the end of his question, session advice, is every organization is different. So you need to tailor it for what you need.
Right. Okay, so here are some things on the checklist. Now, some of them may need a little bit more detail, but there are so many. This is where you get into the it depends situation. So first of all, do you have a clear understanding of your CIO's agenda? You can replace CIO with whoever the person who is going to be sponsoring this, right? But do you have a clear view of the agenda? If not, sit down with them and find out what that agenda is and make sure it can be quantified. Second thing is, look at that agenda and see which items your program will solve or contribute to solving. And then just keep updating that. So third, find a sponsor. That should have been maybe first, actually. Now, how do you find a sponsor? That's a really good question. Well, it all depends on the culture of your organization and the kind of program that you're implementing. It may be the CIO. It may be your direct supervisor. It may be somebody in the business. It all depends on what it is that you're trying to achieve. But one thing that Ken mentioned a little bit earlier was never underestimate the power of just sitting down with somebody and asking them some questions. Find out if they are passionate about what you're doing, if they need what you're doing, if they're excited about what you're giving to them. Those are people who are likely to be your sponsor. Understand what's in it for them, how your program will give that to them. It's kind of a repeat of the first 2 points. Then go back and check the scope of your program. You know, you may have had grand ideas to implement this new practice that you learned about in ITIL, and that's fantastic. It's going to bring great things. But if it doesn't align to the needs of the CIO, it's going to be very difficult for you to get that off the ground. Maybe just put that in your back pocket for a while and focus on something else. Then identify other stakeholders, not just the sponsor. You know as well as I do, and you've been through this enough, that there are politics in every organization. And there are people that are going to be working against your agenda, and there are people that are going to be supporting your agenda. Find out who those people are as soon as you can. This, by the way, is something that a consultant cannot help you with. This is something that you, as somebody who works in that organization, know because you know the ecosystem in a way that an outsider doesn't. So they can help you with the tools that enable you to do this, but this is on the person working in the organization. Then figure out your reporting. Do you have a report which directly shows your achievement of the program in terms of the what's in it for me? Identify the value outcomes. We spoke a little bit about that. Not just what you're going to achieve, the investment side, but look at the green side, the value side as well. Have you linked those? Define how you'll detect changes. So don't just assume that the CIO is going to make changes and will tell you about it. Figure out how you detect that there are changes in the agenda. Great way, include your metrics on the CIO's dashboard, but by these metrics, be very careful on this one. Remember to report achievement, not performance, right? If you're going to sit there and put on your CIO's dashboard the number of calls your service desk solves every day, probably not going to go very far, right? But if you want to put on your dashboard the number of costly, I remember one I can relate to this. I was working in a factory, and one of the things they measured was, did we avoid emissions that would have cost us a state fine?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That was one of the things they measured, and it was on the executive's dashboard, right?
Yep.
But there wasn't on the dashboard a list of every single thing that was happening on the factory floor, right? That just didn't make any sense. So be very careful. Report achievement rather than performance. Ken, you were going to add something to that?
Don't be shy to say metrics on the program on the CEO's dashboard. Okay, we don't have time, but I was very specifically brought as a CIO to resolve a brand new billing system implementation, and the number of issues around the billing system was a key metric for him.
Right.
So put it on the CEO's dashboard if it's a key measure for the CEO. Don't stop at the CIO.
Right. And remember, if that's no longer an important metric, change it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. We're at the end. Sorry, Donna.
Very quickly, we're at time. So for those of you who have to drop, thank you. We always appreciate you attending. For those of you who can stick around, we're gonna let these guys finish wrapping up. And as always, we very much appreciate you attending. And if you didn't grab the personal action plan from our chat, please do so. We always like to see people take what they learned in the webinar and put it into action in their organizations. So Dave, go ahead and wrap up. And while you do, I'm actually going to launch the last poll just to ask.
Thank
do
you.
you actually think you have your CIO support? So you go ahead and finish.
Right. And this is only going to take a minute or two. And so here's just a list. This is really for your takeaway. Metrics that appeal to executives. These are things that you want to think about how you're going to present. I'm not going to go through them one by one, but these are the kind of things, and they're just examples of things that appeal to executives. Notice they're achievement focused rather than performance focused. And then just by way of example, we did some research on the use of ITIL specifically, and here's some examples of some compelling benefits. Right, so we have improved ongoing business operation. This is not IT operation. This is the business. We found that when people used ITIL as part of a concerted ITSM program, they were able to achieve, the more mature they were. In other words, the longer they used them and the more they used them in an integrated way, the more they were able to achieve that objective. And I listed a couple more. One is improving quality of IT services. And interestingly, we found that organizations were able to speed up the success of innovation. And I think Ken mentioned that earlier, but there is some very good research which shows that when you're using an ITSM program, it actually helps you to do things like fail faster, better. So that's it for our presentation. I don't know, Ken, if you have any last things to add.
Not at all. Just thank you to everybody for listening. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the comments back. Really do appreciate them. Thank you very much. And Donna and Lisa, thank you. Really did enjoy the session. Thank you.
Thank you. David, can you go back? I just want to quickly ask you, these ITIL value drivers and this research that was done, is the intention that going forward, that's going to be done year over year, much in the spirit of the DORA metrics that have done such a great job progressing the DevOps movement forward?
Yeah, we want to do two things. One is we want to take this and repeat it year on year, but the other thing is we want to drill down into these and find out why. What combination of practices specifically led to this outcome and why? So we'll be doing
so everybody
a lot more.
Stay tuned. This research, it's kind of early days, in terms of this research, and I think they're still kind of slicing and dicing it a little bit. This could be a whole presentation in and of itself, and hopefully we'll be able to do that one of these days. So, all right. Thank you, gentlemen. Very much appreciate your time. And everyone, cheers. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.